I'm Natalie, and I'm here with my co-host, Kari, and we are thrilled to welcome you to Instinct, a podcast about leadership, one animal at a time.
If you are a business leader or a part of an organization with any other humans, this pod is for you. Each week, Natalie and I do some research on an individual animal to see what we can learn about human leadership from the other species all around us.
And this first episode is actually a special one because this is the animal that inspired the whole idea for this season of Instinct. Kari had made a visit to a wolf sanctuary in Los Angeles, and it apparently totally rocked her world.
Right. I learned so many things about wolves that really made me think about organizations. And animals have been doing the survival thing for a long time. So we thought there must be some lessons we as founders and business leaders could learn from animals to increase our own chance of survival.
So that is what we are up to this season. Here's what you can expect. Kari and I will give you a tour of the animal for the week, and then we will dive into a few key tips for how you can be more like that animal in your own leadership. Please be forewarned, expect bad puns and very stretched metaphors.
Puns mostly from Natalie. Oh, and here's one other important thing that we should state. We are most definitely not animal experts or biologists or ecologists or anything that would give us expertise on animals. We, of course, did do our research on each of the animals that we feature this season, and we'll include those sources in the show notes each week. But we'll probably miss or misstate some important things. So if you are an actual animal expert, please feel free to let us know where we mess up.
All right, so let's get to today's episode. It's all about wolves. We're going to dive into a few key important areas, including the whole myth of the lone wolf, how pack mentality actually contributes to each wolf's individual success, and what teams can learn from the fluid leadership model of wolves. Let's do it. One of the things that struck me immediately when you first talked to me about the wolves was this idea of like a high content versus a low content wolf. I'm wondering if you can share like what that is and what that has to do with the sensitivity bit that you just mentioned, finding some kinship with.
Yeah. So because this is a haven, a wolf haven, wolves are brought to the sanctuary from a variety of different places. So some of them are brought to the sanctuary from the wild, but many of them were wolf dogs. So they're part wolf, part dog, or they're wolves who have been brought into captivity in some way and then couldn't handle the situation that they were in. And so the amount of wolf DNA in the wolf dogs is a huge variety at this place.
Okay, so there's kind of a range of purebred wolfdom or not.
That's right. So the high wolf content are called high content wolf dogs, and low wolf dog or wolf content are called low content wolf dogs. And the difference between the two of them is pretty striking. So low content wolf dog is likely to kind of come up against you as a human, like rub themselves on you and like maybe roll over and ask for a belly rub. Like that's low content wolf dog. And a high content wolf dog is like looking at you from really far away out of the corner of their eyes. And if you so much as move your finger, their whole body moves and their hair stands up.
Okay, well, which one are you? Just to, be explicit.
I'm probably like a 75%. Like I'm definitely on like the high content side. Yeah.
No wonder they started to speak to you.
Totally.
Okay, so before we get any deeper in like what these animals have to teach us, is there anything else you want to name about like your experience at Wolf Haven? And then we can talk about what these animals are actually all about or some of their social and behavioral properties that might help us make some meaning out of it. So anything else happen at Wolf Haven?
Okay, second thing, and then I want to talk about all the research that we've done on wolves and get into the takeaways. So the second thing that really struck me at Wolf Haven was the way that wolves are organized. And that's why I think we're talking to business leaders in particular, because animals also organize themselves in an interdependent way Some do that in a social way, and others do that in the way that they fit into an ecosystem. And
Mhm.
I think wolves are incredibly unique in the way that they organize. And we've been talking for years about how do we build something that's more of a fluid leadership model at Pylea. But there aren't very many good human organizations that model this. But wolves are pretty resilient and hardy organizational structures
Hmm.
that are actually built in a fluid leadership style. And I was fascinated in learning about the different roles that wolves play. And there were so many little alarm bells going off in my head of like, take that to that leader, or apply that to
Mm.
this organization, because there's just a different way that they're organized than kind of the typical hierarchical organizations that we're used to.
Already my interest is kind of, I have like a little going on in my head as you're describing it, because there's this story culturally, at least in the culture I grew up in, about wolves being like a lone character, but you're already starting to describe them in relationship to an organization. So maybe we can start there. Like, how do wolves organize themselves? Or what did you find in your research that helps you to orient towards like a system rather than an individual, which is so different than what the stories of the lone wolf that I know are all about.
Yeah, also the whole lone wolf thing, I was feeling kind of bad for wolves, honestly. I
Hmm.
was doing a ton of research about just the folklore that was developed around wolves. Right, we got the big bad wolf, and I always forget which one is the big bad wolf, the one with the three little pigs.
Um, this is awkward. I don't know. Yeah,
Okay.
someone is going to blow their house down, right? That's a big bad
Yeah, it's
wolf.
like I huff and I puff and I'll blow your house. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Exactly. That seems
Okay.
like three pigs and a wolf,
Yeah. Okay, so that's the lone wolf that tries to blow the piggy's house down. And then
right?
there's the Little Red Riding Hood situation, right, that tries to
Can like
eat.
chase her or like follows her or something,
Yeah, totally. And then we
right?
have this sort of archetype of the lone wolf, this idea that there's like some really dangerous wolf out there.
Right.
And it just kind of feels like not really fair.
Not fair or not true or both.
Well, it's not true. And I think that we might have discussed this a little bit before too, but there were a bunch of these folklores that were developed basically because as towns started to expand, then wolves actually became somewhat dangerous. I think mostly to livestock. I don't
Mm,
think that wolf human interactions actually have ever really been that high,
right. Okay.
but there were some stories, folklore basically to help keep children safe from wolves. And so these stories kind of developed out of that, but like not actually fair or true about the way
Okay.
wolves actually operate.
Okay, got it. And I'm guessing you got to see some of that when you experienced them, that there was not just like a wolf off in its thing. Were they in a group, or how are they organized in as much as we know of the wild?
So it's really different what I saw versus how they organize in the wild. And maybe I'll pass this over to you because I know you did a bunch of research on this as well. Because I'm thinking about the wolf pack, right, goes actually beyond a nuclear family, although it's often constructed around a nuclear family. The wolf haven situation, right? Everyone's an orphan basically.
Yeah, got it.
And
Okay.
so sometimes a wolf pack will coalesce out of a bunch of wolves or individuals from different places. And other times the conflict is too high. Like they're not actually able to kind of gel. It takes a lot of time, I think, and norming and forming and storming, etc., to get the wolf pack to really come together. Do you want to say a little bit about what you learned about wolf packs and their construction?
Yeah. So what I learned is that for sure the narrative of the lone wolf is like not true. Sometimes wolves go off on their own. Particularly, they disperse when they're looking for like new territory or mate, like a mate, and they need to kind of like extend past their like, little pack that they grew up in. But for the most part, they operate with other wolves. And even this idea of like an alpha wolf or a beta wolf seems like there's kind of like in the research a little bit of a question mark around that, because as you were briefly describing, it seems like wolves are like have much more fluid structure of who's leading and for what purpose. So as an example, if I'm remembering from my research correctly, like when wolves are hunting together, who's leading that might be very different than like who's leading interactive play when the wolves come back from a hunt and are kind of like shaking it off and chilling out for a little moment, right? And sometimes the leading wolf physically, like out front, in front of the pack, is not actually the one that is energetically leading, which sometimes is actually in the back. So I learned that one, there's definitely not just one wolf hanging out doing the thing most of the time, but that two, wolves are taking different sort of structural roles on at different times. There is hierarchy, right? There's some dominance in certain particular roles that people are in, not people, wolves. Man, we're going to do that all season.
I know.
And it's less explicitly about like social status than about role in a given moment is what I kind of took away. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, totally. And I think it's fascinating, right? Because the roles can be shared, they could shift depending on how the individuals in the group are doing. It also made me think of, I don't know, did you read that book by Brene Brown, what does she call it? The Heart Aroused? What is it called?
Atlas of the Heart.
Atlas of the Heart. And she talks about working in the kitchen. And
no, I didn't. I didn't read the book, by the way, but apparently I know the name of it.
Yeah, that's better than me, even though I can tell you a story about it. But she talks about how in a kitchen, humans actually shift to fill in the roles, especially as other people get what she calls burnt, what I would call burnt out. And wolves do the same thing, right? They model this really well, which is some will hunt while others conserve energy, and then they'll shift roles to make sure that the pack remains as strong as possible. So the eye is always to how do we create the strongest pack possible, and not so much to like, how do I create the strongest individual possible?
Well, I actually think this is so telling that I think you just displayed some really good pack wolf energy with me right here, because I was noticing that I was like so curious about your experience that I was like kind of leading you and asking you questions about wolves, almost as though like I had never even thought about wolves or done my own research about wolves. And then you did this like kind of wolf jujitsu move where you're like, now I'm going to ask you about your experience, Natalie, researching wolves so that you can also like co-lead this conversation in a different way. So just wanted to name that wolf move you just did.
I like that wolf move.
Okay, so there's like this switching off of roles. What else about their social or behavioral construction did you notice?
Well, I was going to ask you if you would say more about the alpha, beta, omega. You mentioned those just briefly earlier, and maybe we could have a discussion around some of the roles or hierarchy that we think we know exist.
I'm so happy to talk about that, but flagging for us, Kari, right here, I don't freaking remember. So let me go back for a second and then I'll talk to you about it. Do you remember anything?
I can tell you, well, I took a quiz. I'll tell you about the quiz I took.
Tell us. What did you, was it a quiz about are you alpha, beta, omega, or Sharpie? I don't know. What's the other option?
Alphas, betas, omegas, hunters, generals, warriors, guards, and healers.
Oh, of course. How could I forget all 10 of those categories?
And the Nana wolves. Do you remember these? These are the caretaker wolves?
No. You're going to have to school me on the wolf pack situation.
Well, we had a little bet going with the colleagues who went to the wolf connection on what role each of us might take in the wolf pack.
Okay.
And of course, I was like, I'm definitely an omega wolf. Omegas tend to be a little bit submissive. They tend to be more like caregivers. They often like take the heat off of the crowd by like kind of taking things on themselves. So seem to be like a de facto scapegoat. They also are kind of known as the social glue, right? They kind of like are the Swiss Army knife of the wolf pack, becoming whatever is needed in any given moment.
Okay.
They might also initiate play, which I think we're going to talk about a little bit because that's something that I love. Also, it's like the theme of your day today. So we'll talk about that. So I thought I was like definitely an omega. And my two colleagues were like, no.
What did they name you? Alpha?
They said that I'm an alpha, which I was really not excited about at the time, not knowing very much about alphas.
Okay.
But I did take the quiz, and I am indeed an alpha, 82% alpha.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, Yeah, thank you.
You don't feel proud of that at all.
Well, I felt more proud as I learned more, which is that the alphas actually don't lead from in front so much. You mentioned this, that they
Mhm.
often lead from behind. So they're like guiding, strategizing, making decisions for the pack, especially around where to go and like how to conserve energy or like where to get food. But they're actually not often like in front or the showiest or the strongest, which I think is why I get confused sometimes about my own leadership. Because I'm like, I'm definitely not the strongest in the room. I like don't always want to be the center of attention, but I will be if it's helpful.
Got it. This
But
is a bit of
yeah,
another like misnomer. We think of like the lore of the alpha. It tends to be like alpha male often, but like I
right.
guess also there's like an alpha female. I just hear about it a little less. And it tends to be like a sort of showy, out front, dominating thing. So it makes sense that you would not be like super stoked to receive that label. But now that you've learned more, it's like we have a misconception of the alpha wolf, essentially.
Totally. And this whole thing around like, hey, you're an alpha or something like that, or a beta, like the betas actually tend to be the strongest who kind of carry out all the stuff. Like they kind of do all the dirty
Hmm.
work. They tend to be the kind of strongest, most powerful. They usually are the warriors. And the alphas are like, I think we should go this way and maybe kill this kind of thing. And like, hey, by the way, is everyone okay? Like, we're going to put the old wolves in front to make sure that they're taken care of. And that's more alpha energy, actually.
Okay. All right. So we've got alpha, beta, omega. There was like a million more. Are any of them important to name before you tell me what I am?
Not right now, because I think maybe we'll talk about the nano wolves when we get into play and caregiving a little bit.
Okay. So we've
But
got a little bit more of a lay of the land of the wolf organization of sorts. Where else are we going?
but Natalie, will you tell us what kind of role you might take in the wolf pack instead of having me tell you?
Well, I feel a little hamstrung because there's so many that I don't know. But I I feel like often I play more of the beta role in certain situations where there is already an alpha. I think I'm very strong at like actually enacting the things that need to happen in the world. In the absence of an alpha, I will very easily step into that role because I think it's hard to actually make anything happen without alphas.
Mm.
Right? So I think I kind of oscillate there. I definitely don't feel like I'm an omega, but maybe in my healing journey, that's where I'm headed to be
Mm.
like a little bit more of the social glue, a little bit more cohesion based, a little bit less of the executor or the leader. But I don't know. I have some kinship towards the beta.
I certainly see you as an executor. Like that's a role I feel like you naturally pick up. And I think that's the strongest beta. And betas also are known to step in and lead whenever there's space.
Yeah. And I think I sometimes feel something I'm learning about myself is that in the absence of, if I think about an alpha as they who can hold what is most needed in the group and know what to do with it, sometimes that's like, where do we go? Sometimes that's like, what are we feeling? What's here?
Mm.
What's present? If I think about the absence of an alpha, it's sort of, I will step into that because I know how important that role is. But in the presence of somebody else who's already doing that, I usually feel like great relief that I'm not on my own
Mm.
and that someone else is like, who's sensitive enough can hold that too. And so I think I prefer beta and thrive if there's an alpha who I really trust.
Mm.
So that's what I'm leaning into a little bit more of noticing that I feel like I have to carry less when there is an alpha that I trust. And so yeah, I welcome all the trustworthy alphas in the world.
You know what it makes me think of, Natalie, is a client that I was meeting with last week
Hmm.
who was getting some feedback from their team for a 360 evaluation. And the feedback pretty consistently is that this leader, the CEO, often kind of steps aside from his leadership. And the way that he does that is by saying, like, oh, I don't really see hierarchy, or I don't really see myself as better than others, But what ends up happening is this creation of a leadership vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm thinking there are lots of people who kind of maybe they're omegas, so they'll like step in to try to make things fit, or the betas will step in and try to add strategy to like keep people going. But it creates this almost like I'm imagining like a wolf pack who's lost an alpha, and there's this like frenetic anxiety in the pack,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like they can still do it, right? Because there's fluidity
Mm-hmm.
in the wolf pack, and everyone's kind of coming in to make it work. But there's a settledness in a pack that has
Mm.
clear direction.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be like I'm better than everybody, right? In fact, an alpha wolf would never position themselves that way. They're
Right.
actually often not the best, but
Right.
there's some sort of settling that occurs when there's a presence of like true strategic leadership.
Totally. I'm noticing in my body, like it's like a alpha wolf leadership is like a grounded energy.
Mm.
Beta feels a little bit like flighty to me, like a make stuff happen. That's like not where we are right now.
Hmm.
And some of the omega feels like a little bit like fawny or like appeasy or maybe I don't know, a little bit basically dysregulated nervous systems without the grounded alpha.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that comparison.
All right. So you've mentioned play a couple times. And what I read about wolves playing is that it's not just for fun and games, that they do this intentional play thing, particularly after like they've gone and hunted or done something stressful to basically like de-roll, we might call it, and to reconnect with each other and like reduce collective stress in the wolf pack, which is like pretty incredible. We see this in kids all the time. It's such a natural state of like moving energy, right? But it's cool to see it in an animal. So play is part of wolf life.
And when I was a kid and learning about animals, I always thought play was like training for adulthood.
Mm.
You see like bear cubs playing, and it's because they're like practicing all the skills they need to become an adult. But honestly, I never had imagined or learned that animals played as a vital function of their survival. Like I had not ever heard that before the research on wolves.
What's the connection to the vital survival bit? What'd you read about that?
Yeah, I don't know if I know exactly why I said it that way, but what I was reading about the reason that wolves play is that it diffuses conflict. So
Mhm.
if there's tension in the wolf pack, it's a part of I almost imagine like, two like husky dudes in a bar, and like one of them like looks the wrong way at somebody and the other one's like, "You want to take this outside?" That kind of thing. And it's like
Right.
almost like a healthy version of that, like dispelling of the energy, like, getting into a little bit of an altercation in a safe place so it
Mm.
doesn't kind of like eat up the family from the inside and cause conflict.
Mm.
So that's what the omega does, right? Is like initiates play, especially where there's tension or conflict, to help keep the health of the environment.
Right.
But there's also something around like touch and like being with other wolf members that I like that you talked about. The nervous system seems to like regulate the nervous system of the pack as a whole and promote cohesion.
Right. Right. And play as not a uh, practice and play as so you're saying play isn't like we're doing this like a role play. It's not like that kind of practice. And we're not playing to like poke at each other as a secret way of like sending each other love signals, like
Right.
we're not like teasing play. I mean, maybe that's how it might look to us as humans, but it's like play as a strategy for efficacy,
Yeah. I
where
think
like
that's
efficacy is like driven by how together and stable is the pack,
mhm.
which is pretty cool. We don't see that as often. I mean, we talk about sometimes innovation being connected to efficacy, but play often gets put in opposition to work,
Right.
right? And some of what you're describing here to me sounds like no, play is the work for
Yeah.
wolves.
Yeah. Was there more that you were aware of on that you wanted to share? Since it's your play day?
My play day. Let's see. Any more of that? I don't think so. Other than I don't remember reading this explicitly, so maybe I just made it up. But there is some energy around the wolf pack play thing that for me was also about modeling, meaning like when you are in a pack organization, meaning like that's how you're organized. You're not organized towards the individual, but towards the collective. Then I imagine you can't help but notice like what's going on around you, right? And when the energy around you is people playing, it's hard to ignore that, right?
Yeah.
And so I just wonder about the way that play gets modeled and passed down or passed throughout. I find if I enter into a room where people are being like genuinely playful in a way that is supportive, as opposed to the like teasing or faking kind of play, it's hard to be like, I'm going to be grumpy. How dare you people play with each other like that, right? I kind of want to like join in.
Yeah.
And so there's something about the modeling and the welcoming nature of play that resonates with me about wolves.
I feel like that is probably the part of the wolf essence that you most naturally embody.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Should we get into what humans have to learn from these beautiful creatures?
Let's do it.
All right, give me your like bullet point number 1, Kari.
I feel like you're interviewing me a lot about wolves today. I'm feeling very on the
sorry.
spot.
Okay, I'll go first. I'll
Okay.
be the beta number 1.
Thank you.
In the absence of a desire to lead from out front. Okay, so the most obvious one to me is that humans can learn from wolves about how to have rotating leadership. Meaning, like, we have this weird obsession with hierarchy. We also have this weird obsession with like fixed roles and responsibilities because that creates clarity and clarity creates accountability.
Mm-hmm.
But that is still oriented towards this idea that there's like each person for themselves so that we can like put them in their little boxes and like, ta-da, you did it. Good job, check mark. If we think about leadership as like a rotating role, or like you were talking about in the kitchen with the chefs, it's like kind of a mind flip, right? To be like, who needs to lead in this moment and for what reason based off of what skills either they have or we need for a project.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's just so obvious to me about the wolves as bullet point number 1 is humans could really gain a lot from rotating their leadership in different environments in different moments. How's that one landing with you?
I mean, I love that. I think I've been searching my whole life for an organization that would allow people to shift in and out of leadership and move around roles depending on what was going on. And I mean, something I was just thinking about recently is like the CEO who's great for, say, a peacetime company might not be the same CEO who can adequately lead a wartime company. But does that mean that you change a CEO because we're in an economic downturn? Or does that mean that you have enough humility in your company that different leaders or people in the organization can step forward and step back as their particular skill sets and energy are needed? I mean, how amazing is that for the strength of the entire organization?
Right.
It just makes sense.
It does make sense. And it seems, I'm imagining people listening being like, okay, but for real, y'all, like how would that ever actually work? What do you think is required to enable that? You mentioned like humility, but like, are there things you've seen structurally that like make this possible?
Well, I was watching The Wolves and I was really hoping they were just going to tell me how to translate this to human world. But I mean, there's one thing that doesn't really happen in wolf packs, which surprises me, is that there aren't really what are called dominance contests. Like that doesn't actually exist in a wolf pack. But there seems to be some sort of intuitive awareness of the individual's strengths and abilities. And they're constantly watching each other's body language to assess where are the other individuals in the pack and where can you step in or step out in order to create the strength of the organization or the pack.
Yeah.
And so it makes me think that in order to create some sort of fluid leadership structure, we're going to have to get way better as humans at observing and just paying attention to where everybody is in any given moment, as well as what their key strengths are.
Right. Like attunement, awareness. Maybe it's attunement, awareness, acknowledgement of those strengths and then actual application of them, as opposed to either just not knowing, not sensing, or ignoring what someone's good at because you feel like you should be better than they are at it, even if you're not.
Yeah, and it's kind of like looking beyond their role, right? Just because you're the alpha doesn't mean that in any given moment you're the best wolf in the room to make a strategic decision.
Right. Right.
Um,
I'm thinking about, when have I felt like I could step forward, step back, notice strengths and what enabled me to do that.
hmm,
And it's usually, I don't know that I'm that good at this, to be frank, but if I give myself some cred, when I am able to do this, I think it's usually also when I'm feeling least insecure or most secure, that what my role is not to prove something to somebody, including myself, but to sort of like be a little bit more zoomed out and be like, what is actually needed in this scenario?
mhm.
As opposed, it's I have a different perspective rather than like I am the center of the world and I must do this in order to feel good about me. And
Yeah.
so it seems like there's awareness at the, strengths of everyone else level. And I think for me, there's also this like awareness of what role am I currently playing? And am I at the center of that universe that I've created? Or am I a little bit more detached and able to kind of see the system at play?
Mm. Yeah, I was thinking about that nervous system comment you made earlier. And it seems that a regulated nervous system is much more likely, from what you're saying, to be able to look at the needs of the organization, but also to notice something about the individuals in the room and make a less kind of egocentric determination about what to do next.
I'm just chuckling hearing you describe that because I'm imagining being in a team meeting and hearing someone say, or many people say, it feels like our group nervous system is like not quite grounded. Like maybe we need to kind of recenter or like find some way to find our feet before we make a
Mm,
decision or before X, Y, or Z. I just that sounds amazing to me. Like a group being able to sense that and actually do something about it rather than following a default state, which is like often choosing something really quickly to get out of the discomfort or one person choosing and everyone else is just along for the ride or just being in a constant stress response state, but never being able to acknowledge it. So I wonder what it would feel like to be inside of a team where that's kind of like everyone has that vocabulary.
mm.
Sounds like that's what wolves kind of do. They all have like a shared vocabulary around like a collective nervous system of the pack.
Yeah, entirely. Also, when you just said all that, I was kind of like, isn't that the way that teams should operate? Like that all sounded very normal and reasonable to me.
You, like all the others you saw at this wolf connection place, now have a deep affinity for the wolf. You can see the connection. Yeah, maybe it's like if you go there, you become connected to the wolves and like take on their leadership style. It does feel intuitive, you're right. And yet, I don't know, be for real with me. Like, do you think this happens inside organizations?
Not very often.
Right.
But okay, but I think the other thing that wolves do really well that I think is a precursor to this is that remember I was telling you about the wolf, kind of the example of the wolf saying no thank you to a human
Hmm.
petting them?
Good boundary.
Yeah, wolves also are so because the high content wolves have such a sensitive nervous system, like they're so attuned to the smallest things. I think they also have to be incredibly picky about how they regulate their own nervous systems. Like
Say more about that.
I think that they well, here's what I observed of the wolves. And I didn't read anything about this, I just observed it. So this is
Okay.
my experience, direct experience. Is that the high content wolves were not seeking kind of high stimulus environments, and they would only the people at the wolf connection who are really good at knowing what's going on with the wolves would only bring them out for a short period of time and ask us to be very quiet and to not make eye contact and to kneel down and be very still. And the wolves also will regulate themselves, right? Like move in or move out depending on their own nervous system state. Whereas the dogs, which I think actually most humans are a little bit maybe more like domesticated dogs, like no sense of what's happening. Like, oh, there's a lot of commotion happening over there. I want to go find out what's happening. I'm going to flop over on my belly. I don't know what's dangerous or what's not dangerous. And so the wolves are actually, I think, monitoring their nervous system states so carefully because they're so sensitive that in order to really have their ear to the ground and know what's going on with the individuals around them, they also have to avoid taking in too much stimulus and overwhelming their senses. So it's kind of like this double-edged sword a little bit.
Right. I feel like you're describing a little bit of the shadow side of if organizations actually did this, what would the consequences be for them too? Right. And there's like, it seems like there needs to be much less going on in order to be able to attune effectively to know in any given moment what is going on. That would require organizations to probably like get rid of all of the chaos, focus, slow down a little bit, which maybe that's why we don't see it so much. It's hard to imagine, especially, we work with a lot of startup folks.
Yeah.
That would be a reasonable orientation to take.
It's like the slogan of a wolf pack would never be move fast and break things.
It'd be like, kneel down and don't look me in the eye.
Exactly.
Slow and steady, but very attuned.
Yeah. It's like said no startup ever.
And yet some businesses might be very well positioned to do that. Not all businesses, but some, right? Like we work with people all day and our primary thing we do is attune, if I can be honest, right? It's like what's actually happening right now is a very wolf question.
It is a very wolf question.
What else?
So I feel like we went a bunch of places with your comment, which I really liked. I was thinking about so we talked about the regulation of the individual. We talked also about the group attunement, right? And like how does that fluid leadership emerge? This is maybe a super obvious one, but I'll just say it that I didn't say this earlier, but lone wolves lose on average over 65% of anything they kill to scavengers and other things.
Oh, wow.
Whereas if a wolf hunts in a pack, they get to retain much more of their kill and all of the individuals are much better fed and taken care of. Which seems really obvious. And I think this is why we form companies to begin with, is that we just do better in groups. Like a pack is just more successful than an individual in the wolf world. And it feels like a little bit that's probably true in the human world as well.
It does sound obvious. And as somebody who has experienced a fair share of relational wounding in my life, the first thing that went on in my head was like, yeah, but, actually groups are terrible. People are terrible. And I don't really want to spend time with any of them. And I am better off just fending for myself. I might lose 80% of, I forget the stat you gave, of the kills that I make, 60%, whatever. I might lose some, but I still got like a lot of percent. So can you make the argument for me of why I should actually believe that groups are better if I'm somebody who's had a lot of trouble working with people in my life or being in groups?
Well, the first thing I would say is that given that share, I would not argue against you at all. I would say you're probably actually pulling the first lever of wolf genius, which is taking care of your nervous system.
Thank you so much.
So I would say that's probably a really good choice for you, is to be cautious of the relationships. Because I think the other thing that happens for wolves, right, and this is what I said about the wolf connection, is that if the pack isn't adequately gelled, then the wolves actually do become more dangerous to each other.
So there's like a key type of connection in the group that is necessary and enables the kind of high functioning behavior you're talking about, not just like literally being in proximity to other wolves.
I think so, right? I think if we see a dysfunctional company, I think a dysfunctional company can do less than a high functioning individual, but a high functioning company can do exponentially more than a high functioning individual.
Oh, I really like that. And when I felt most lonely on teams I've worked on before is when it feels more like me, I'm a wolf, and there's a bunch of wolves next to me, but we don't have like the actual social contract that we are a pack.
Yeah.
That's helping me to see that, my sensitivity towards the other is also a good tool of knowing, are we gelled or not?
Mhm. Mhm. And a wolf, will not approach a pack where they don't feel like their nervous system can calm and they can perform at their highest. That would not
Mm.
be a smart wolf move.
Great. Great. I'm wondering, as we kind of wrap up this first exploration of aminals. That's what I used to call aminals. I mean,
That's really
animals.
cute.
Of aminals, if I'm listening to this and I lead a team, or I'm becoming a new manager of other people, or I am just on a team, what would you remind me of to take inspiration from the wolves?
There's something that I wish I had something quippy to say here, but the wolves, I think, are genius in two ways. And sometimes I remind myself that the pack is greater than the individual. Feels like that's like a calling
Hmm.
in the wolf way. And maybe the invitation for leaders there is to look around the room or the metaphorical room and ask what's needed for the organization rather than thinking so much about fulfilling the role or the contract that exists in a fixed way. Yeah, it's almost seeing yourself as a part of an organism that is larger, right? Each of us plays a vital role in an organization or organism rather than thinking about each of our individual roles being fixed.
Mm.
That's not quippy, though. What would you have
Yeah, that
people
was
walk away?
beautiful, though.
Thanks,
The
Natalie.
essence of what you just said to me, what it made me think of was, I do think that there is something called self leadership, which is like, managing yourself, leading yourself, and that's really powerful. But then there's something just inherent to the word leadership that
Mm.
it sounds like you're calling in or inviting people to recognize that by definition is in relationship to others. Like
Mhm.
leading
Mhm.
implies led in some way.
Right.
And that orientation towards the other, the collective, the group feels like a nice reminder.
Yeah. It's almost like a very embodied I mean, I almost have this image, and maybe we can add this image in the show notes. Wolves almost always travel in a line, and the alpha is always at the back so they can see everything. And I just think of that as a visual that's beautiful for this idea of servant leadership.
Right.
And it's not eating last. We say like founders eat last, and this kind of it's I think there's some helpful and unhelpful ways that people interpret that. But in the kind of wolf world, the leaders walk last because it gives them the greatest perspective, but it also allows them to be sensitive to the whole group rather than just a collection of high performance individuals.
Right. They can sort of have more of a peripheral view of things as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
So here's my takeaway, which is weird because I hadn't really thought of this as I was doing the research, and we haven't even really talked about it right now, but it just pinged into my consciousness, so I'm going to say it, which is that you started this by telling us about this like high content, low content wolf dog thing.
Mhm.
And one way to read that is like to be more like a wolf, like get more sensitive, become more
Mm.
attuned, become more aware, like slow things down, be quiet. But another way that I'm currently reading this is that like high content, low content actually implies like a range of wolf content. And I think inspiration around being able to titrate up and down high
Mm.
content, low content as a wolf and as a leader that's what's resonating with me now in the moment of, does this situation call for high content wolf? Like what's going on my team? Where are we losing track? What's necessary for the big picture? How are people doing? Where do we need more intentional play? Like that sensitivity, super powerful. And the like rollover, fast energy, like can also be really powerful for visioning, getting people rallied around a cause, taking a step forward into something, making a decision. So I'm leaning into like wolf range rather than, to be a real wolf leader, you have to be this high content or alpha wolf.
I love that. Yeah, it's almost like that fluidity that's necessary within the pack maybe actually is one of the wolf's greatest superpowers. The ability to shift between the different ways of being and read the situation to show up in whatever way is necessary.
Yeah.
I love that.
All right. Anything else we want to name about wolves today?
That's plenty from me.
All right. So we'll end it here, other than I have a compulsion to say, but wait, there's more, because we're going to explore so many other animals over the next 7 sessions, episodes. That's what they call it on a podcast. And they're going to be weird, and they're going to be mundane, and they're going to be boring, and they're going to be exhilarating. And we're going to learn a lot from each of them. So I'm looking forward to it, Kari. All right. See you on the next one. Thanks for joining this week's show.
Thank you to everyone who helped make this season of Instinct possible, our amazing Kickstarter funders, the team at Supermix who help make sure that this show sounds profesh, John Rothfelds for producing our theme music.
If you want any more deets on us, the podcast, or past episodes, please visit us at instinctpodcast.com. There you can leave us a note or a review, or you can tell us that we totally messed something up, or maybe even more importantly, you can tell us if we missed something juicy about this week's animal that we should have touched on. We'd love to hear from you.
If you like this episode, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
And we'll see you next week.
Mm-hmm.